Welcome. As you settle into this moment, perhaps lying in bed, perhaps sitting quietly in the stillness of evening, I invite you to rest. Let your breath slow, let your shoulders sink, and let your thoughts loosen their grip. And as we begin, let me ask you softly, where are you listening from, and what time is it there? Hold the answer gently in your mind. It is your anchor in the present, even as we drift together into the past. Tonight, we will step into the world of the American Civil War. From 1861 to 1865, life across the United States was shaped by hunger, disease, endless marches, and the quiet endurance of ordinary people. Soldiers lived in weary camps, families survived on scraps of food. Enslaved people searched for freedom, and children learned quickly that their world was no longer safe. This story will not rush, nor will it overwhelm. It will unfold slowly, steadily, like footsteps on a long road, allowing your mind to wander gently, perhaps toward sleep. And when our journey is finished, I will leave you with soothing music to help you drift further into rest. So, let us begin. Imagine the American countryside in 1861, peaceful at first, but on the edge of division, waiting for the storm of war to arrive. When war began in 1861, young men from across the divided nation enlisted in great numbers. Many thought the conflict would be short, over within months. They imagined parades, honor, and quick victory. The reality they stepped into was far quieter, harsher, and far less glorious. Imagine yourself in a Civil War camp. Rows of white canvas tents stretch across an open field. Smoke rises from small fires where soldiers prepare meager meals. The air smells faintly of wood smoke, damp earth, and unwashed clothes. Inside a tent, the ground is hard. A blanket or straw may soften it, but rain seeps through, turning dirt to mud. Rats scurry at night, attracted by scraps of food. Lice infest clothing, crawling unseen, causing constant itching. The days are long, filled with drills, chores, and waiting. Soldiers chop wood, haul water, clean weapons. The sound of hammers and saws echoes as crude huts are built to replace tents in winter. The camp never truly rests. Always noise, always activity, always the presence of so many men crowded together. Between camps were the marches. Soldiers walked for miles each day, carrying heavy packs filled with blankets, weapons, and supplies. Boots wore thin quickly, feet blistered, backs ached. The line of men stretched across the horizon, dust rising in clouds as they moved. Imagine walking hour after hour, your feet sore, your throat dry, your pack pressing heavily into your shoulders. The air is hot, the road unending. Around you, others stumble, some fall behind, some are carried by comrades. The march is not glorious. It is monotony, fatigue, and pain. Food was a constant struggle. Soldiers received rations of hardtack, salted pork or beef, beans, and coffee when available. Hardtack was a simple biscuit of flour and water, baked hard to last months. It was dry, tasteless, often infested with weevils. Men joked about it, but ate it hungrily, softening it in coffee or stew. Imagine biting into a piece of hardtack. It is so hard you must soak it first. The taste is bland, the texture gritty. You chew slowly, swallowing with water. Around you, others do the same, the crunch of biscuit and the smell of salted meat filling the camp. Fresh food was rare. When possible, soldiers foraged, buying or stealing vegetables, fruit, or milk from nearby farms. But many meals were plain, repetitive, and small. Hunger was a constant companion, and malnutrition wore down bodies as much as marching or fighting. In camp, the greatest enemy was not bullets, but disease. With so many men crowded together, Sanitation was poor. Latrines overflowed. Water grew polluted. Food spoiled quickly. Dysentery, typhoid, and measles spread like fire. Imagine a sick soldier lying on a blanket in his tent. His face is pale, his body weak with fever. Around him, others cough and groan. There are few medicines, few doctors, and little understanding of germs. For many, sickness ended life more often than battle did. Yet, amid hardship, there were moments of relief. Soldiers sang songs around campfires, played cards, wrote letters home. A soldier might sit quietly, reading a letter by candlelight. The paper smudged with dirt and grease, the words of family bringing brief comfort. Imagine that scene. A man hunched in his tent, the flicker of a candle lighting his tired face. His hands tremble as he unfolds the letter, his lips moving softly as he reads words of love and longing from home. For a moment, the war fades, replaced by memory and hope. Day after day, the rhythm repeated. Drill, march, eat, wait, sleep. The monotony was broken only by skirmishes, orders, or sickness. Soldiers entered war dreaming of honor, but most of their time was consumed by routine, discomfort, and endurance. Picture now a Civil War camp at dusk. Fires glow across the field, men sit in groups, singing softly or talking quietly. Smoke drifts in the air, blending with the scent of coffee and pork. Beyond the camp, the countryside lies still, unaware of the battles that will one day scar its fields. For soldiers, this was life. Endless waiting, endless hunger, endless weariness. For us, accustomed to comfort, such days would be nearly impossible to endure. For them, it was survival, repeated each day until war or sickness decided otherwise. When men marched away to join the Union or Confederate armies, they left behind households that still needed to endure. Farms did not stop growing, animals still required care, children still needed food, warmth, and guidance. And yet, the familiar rhythm of life was broken, reshaped by absence and uncertainty. For many women, war meant taking on the roles of men while keeping their own. A farmer's wife might now plow fields, repair fences, and harvest crops, while still cooking, sewing, and raising children. Her days stretched long, from before dawn until after dark. Imagine a woman guiding a mule through a field. The soil is heavy, her hands blister, her back aches. Sweat runs down her face, yet she presses on, knowing that if she does not sow seed, her family will starve. At night, she mends clothes by lamplight, her children asleep nearby, her thoughts never far from her absent husband. In towns, women ran shops or worked in factories, producing textiles, uniforms, or munitions. Others served as nurses, teachers, or clerks, filling spaces left by men. Their presence in public life grew, though always under the shadow of war. Children, too, bore heavy burdens. Boys as young as 10 tended fields, herded animals, chopped wood. Girls sewed clothing, cooked, and cared for younger siblings. Childhood, for many, ended early, replaced by labor. Imagine a boy carrying buckets of water from a well, his small arms straining, his face grim with determination. Behind him, a girl kneels at a hearth, stirring a pot of thin stew, her hands red from heat and work. Their laughter is muted, their innocence narrowed by necessity. The greatest burden was uncertainty. Letters from soldiers arrived irregularly, often weeks or months late. News of battles carried rumors of death, but rarely certainty. Families waited, prayed, and feared. Imagine a woman at her doorway, a letter in hand. The ink is smudged, the paper torn. She reads the words slowly, her heart aching. Her husband is alive, for now, but weary, hungry, sick. She folds the letter carefully, places it in a box, and lights a candle for his safety. For weeks afterward, she waits again, unsure if another letter will ever come. For enslaved families, war brought both suffering and possibility. Some were forced to labor harder as white men left for battle. Others found chances to escape, fleeing toward Union lines where freedom was promised. Families were often torn apart, scattered by sale, escape, or capture. Imagine an enslaved mother holding her child tightly in a small cabin. Outside, the world shifts. Soldiers march, rumors of emancipation spread. She whispers prayers into the dark, uncertain if tomorrow will bring freedom or deeper chains. Neighbors often relied on one another. Women shared labor, pooling resources, caring for each other's children. Churches offered solace, though they too were strained by loss. Communities bore the war together, yet each household carried its own grief. Picture now a quiet American farmhouse at night during the Civil War. The fields are dark, the barn silent. Inside, a woman sits at a table, sewing by lamplight, her children asleep on a straw mattress nearby. On the wall hangs a letter, its words faint but precious. The room is filled with silence, heavy with absence, yet still alive with the determination to endure. For families left behind, survival was not glory. It was work, worry, and waiting. For us today, it would feel unbearably heavy. For them, it was simply life, reshaped, uncertain, yet carried forward, day by day. It is often said that in the Civil War, disease killed more soldiers than battle. For every man struck down by musket fire or cannon shot, many more were lost to fever, infection, and unsanitary conditions. The war was fought as much in crowded tents and converted barns as on fields of combat. Imagine a church turned into a hospital. The pews are removed, cots lined across the floor. The air is heavy with the smell of sweat, blood, and smoke. Candles flicker, casting shadows on weary faces. Outside, wagons bring in the wounded, their groans muffled by cloth. Elsewhere, barns, warehouses, and private homes were used as hospitals. Sometimes, tents were pitched in open fields, rain seeping through canvas roofs, mud pooling beneath cots. Nurses worked tirelessly, yet supplies were always short. The greatest threat was not wounds but disease. Dysentery spread rapidly through camps, carried by polluted water. Typhoid, malaria, and smallpox swept through regiments. Pneumonia struck in cold weather. With men crowded together, contagion was unstoppable. Imagine a soldier lying weakly on a cot. His lips are dry, his skin hot with fever. Around him, men cough, groan, and shiver. The air is thick, heavy, unmoving. A nurse wipes his forehead with a damp cloth, her hands weary from tending dozens like him. There is little more she can do. Medicine was fragile, its limits sharp. Germ theory was not yet widely understood. Surgeons often operated without washing their hands or instruments. Infections spread easily. Amputations were common, performed quickly with saws, often without anesthesia or with only chloroform when available. Imagine the scene softly, without horror. A surgeon works steadily, his hands practiced, his tools worn. A nurse steadies the patient, whispering reassurance. The air smells faintly of alcohol and sweat. Outside, another line of patients waits. The rhythm is relentless, the hope uncertain. Women played a vital role as nurses and caregivers. Figures like Clara Barton and Dorothea Dix organized efforts, while countless unnamed women tended to soldiers in field hospitals and homes. They washed clothes, cleaned wounds, brought water, and wrote letters for the dying. Imagine Clara Barton in a dim tent at night, carrying lantern light to wounded men. Her presence is calm, her movements steady, her words gentle. For many soldiers, a nurse's quiet voice was the last comfort they knew. For families, disease in camps was a silent thief. Letters home often carried news not of wounds, but of fever. A mother might receive word that her son had died not in battle, but in his tent, lost to illness unseen. Imagine opening such a letter. The words are brief. The handwriting rushed. Your son took ill last week. He passed quietly in his sleep. The grief is sharp, yet distant, carried on ink and paper. Picture now a Civil War hospital at dusk. The sky outside is turning orange, the air cooling. Inside, rows of cots stretch into shadow. Nurses move quietly, tending patients. The sounds are muted. Soft coughs, murmured prayers, whispered reassurances. A candle burns steadily, its light reflected in weary eyes. This was the silent war. Disease, infection, and frailty. It claimed more lives than battle, and for those who lived it, survival was never certain. For us today, with modern medicine, such vulnerability would feel unbearable. For them, it was daily reality. For enslaved men, women, and children, the outbreak of war in 1861 brought not only disruption, but a glimmer of possibility. Their labor had built much of the Southern economy, their bodies held in bondage for generations. Now, as Union armies marched southward, the institution that bound them began to tremble. Imagine a row of small wooden cabins on a plantation. The walls are thin, the roof patched with straw. Smoke rises faintly from chimneys, though the air inside is still cold. Families gather around a small fire, bowls of cornmeal mush in their hands. The meal is meager, yet shared with quiet strength. Enslaved people worked from before dawn until after dusk. In fields, they planted, hoed, and harvested cotton, tobacco, or corn. Overseers watched constantly, whips at their side. Even as war raged, the work did not stop. The war brought confusion. Rumors spread quickly. The Union had freed slaves. Lincoln had signed an order. Armies were coming to liberate plantations. Some were true, some not. Without newspapers or certainty, enslaved families lived in a fog of hope and fear. Imagine a whispered conversation at night. Families sit together in a cabin, the door closed, voices hushed. A man speaks of freedom promised by Union soldiers, of escape through the woods. A woman warns of capture, of patrols with dogs. The children listen wide-eyed, uncertain of what tomorrow might bring. For many, the arrival of Union armies opened a path to freedom. Men and women fled plantations, walking at night, hiding by day, guided by rivers, stars, or whispered directions. Entire families sometimes risked the journey, though danger was constant. Imagine walking barefoot through woods at midnight. The air is cool, branches snap softly beneath your feet. You carry a small child, their head against your shoulder. Behind you, the plantation fades into darkness. Ahead lies uncertainty. Union soldiers, perhaps safety, perhaps capture. Each step is both hope and fear. Those who reached Union lines were often taken into contraband camps. These were makeshift settlements where former slaves lived under military protection. Conditions were harsh, crowded tents, limited food, disease. Yet for many, they were the first steps toward freedom. Imagine a camp on the edge of a Union fort. Smoke rises from cooking fires. Children play barefoot in the dirt. Women wash clothes in buckets. Men work unloading supplies. The camp is noisy, crowded, and uncertain. But it is free, and that alone makes it different from life before. In 1863, President Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, declaring enslaved people in Confederate states free. It did not end slavery everywhere immediately, but it gave new force to Union armies, turning the war into a fight not only for unity, but for freedom. Imagine enslaved families hearing the news for the first time. A preacher stands in a clearing, reading aloud from a newspaper. The words are halting, the meaning momentous. Some weep, some laugh, some kneel in prayer. For the first time, the promise of freedom feels near, though war still rages. Many freed men joined the Union Army, serving in regiments of United States colored troops. Women supported camps, cooked, sewed, or nursed. Their presence strengthened the Union cause, and their courage reshaped the nation's meaning of liberty. Imagine a newly freed man standing tall in a Union uniform. The cloth is rough, the boots worn, yet his bearing is proud. He holds a rifle, his eyes steady. Behind him, a flag ripples in the wind. He has gone from bondage to soldier, from silence to voice. Picture now a small fire at night, deep in a southern field. Around it, an enslaved family huddles quietly. They whisper prayers, sing softly, their voices low and steady. Beyond the darkness, armies march, battles rage. But here, in this fragile moment, hope flickers. A hope that soon the chains of generations may finally break. For enslaved people, the Civil War was not distant. It was the very center of their lives. It brought hardship, danger, and uncertainty, but also the first true path toward freedom. For them, survival was not only day by day, but generation by generation. The Civil War was fought across a vast landscape. Fields of wheat and corn became battlefields. Forests echoed with gunfire. Rivers carried armies and supplies. Their waters darkened with smoke. Towns and farms, once peaceful, were consumed by marching columns and cannon fire. The land itself became part of the war, its rhythms disrupted, its beauty scarred. Most battles were fought in open fields. Men lined up in ranks, shoulder to shoulder, their muskets ready. Cannons thundered from distant hills. The fields shook with the sound of hooves, boots, and iron. Imagine standing on a farm field in Virginia. The air smells of grass, but also of smoke. Rows of men march forward, their steps steady, their faces grim. Around them, fences splinter, crops are trampled, earth is torn by cannon shot. The land that once fed families now bears the weight of war. When the fighting ended, those fields lay scarred. Dead lay where they fell. Farms ruined, fences gone. For farmers returning home, the land was almost unrecognizable. Some battles took place in dense forests. At Chancellorsville and in the wilderness of Virginia, the trees themselves became barriers, hiding friend and foe alike. Smoke hung heavy between trunks. Fires spread through dry leaves, and confusion reigned. Imagine walking through such a forest during battle. The trees are close, the ground uneven. Smoke makes it difficult to see. Gunfire echoes in every direction. Men stumble through undergrowth, their uniforms catching on branches. The forest, once quiet, becomes a labyrinth of danger. Rivers were lifelines and obstacles. Armies marched along their banks, built bridges to cross, or used them to supply food and ammunition. The Mississippi, in particular, became central. Control of it meant control of trade, of movement, of the very heart of the South. Imagine the wide Mississippi at dawn. Its waters are calm, glistening in soft light. Along its banks, Union gunboats sit silently, smoke rising faintly from their stacks. On the far shore, Confederate batteries wait, their cannons hidden among trees. The river is beautiful, yet heavy with tension. War often swept directly into towns. At Gettysburg, Fredericksburg, and countless smaller places, homes became hospitals, streets became battlefields. Civilians huddled in cellars, listening to cannon fire above, their lives disrupted by forces far beyond their control. Imagine a small town square. Only weeks earlier, it echoed with market stalls and children's laughter. Now, soldiers march through, their boots pounding the cobblestones. Cannon fire shakes windows, doors are barricaded, families hide in silence. When the battle passes, the town is left broken, its people scarred. The aftermath of battles transformed landscapes, broken fences, burned barns, churned fields, and silent forests marked where armies had clashed. Farmers returned to ruined fields, their crops destroyed, their homes gone. Survivors picked through debris, searching for tools, animals, or keepsakes. Imagine standing in a field after battle. The smoke has cleared, silence heavy. The ground is torn, crops flattened, trees splintered. A fence lies in pieces. A barn smoulders faintly. The land is scarred, but life must return. Seeds planted again, homes rebuilt, survival carried forward. Picture now the American countryside at dusk, after years of war. Fields lie barren, towns half empty, rivers quiet but bearing memories. Forests regrow, but whispers of gunfire linger in imagination. For those who lived there, the land was never the same. The Civil War did not only take lives, it changed the very shape of the land, marking farms, towns, and rivers with scars that endured long after the last cannon fell silent. The Civil War was shaped not only by soldiers and families, but also by the decisions of leaders. From Washington to Richmond, from White House to war councils, men debated strategy, issued orders, and bore the burden of choices that would decide the fate of millions. For Abraham Lincoln, the war was both political and deeply personal. A man of quiet demeanor and steady resolve, he carried the heavy responsibility of preserving the Union. Imagine Lincoln, late at night in the White House. His desk is covered with letters, reports of battles lost, requests from generals, pleas from grieving families. The only light comes from a single lamp, casting long shadows across the room. His face is tired, lines deep from worry. He leans over, writing carefully, each word weighed, each decision carrying lives upon it. Lincoln's speeches, though calm, were heavy with conviction. At Gettysburg, he spoke briefly, reminding a weary nation of the meaning of sacrifice. His Emancipation Proclamation turned the war into not only a struggle for union, but for freedom. Yet Lincoln's burden was constant doubt. Critics surrounded him, newspapers mocked him, generals often failed him. He carried not only the weight of a fractured nation, but also the grief of his own losses, including the death of his young son Willie in 1862. In Richmond, Jefferson Davis led the Confederacy. A former U.S. Senator, he believed fiercely in the Southern cause. Yet his role was no less fraught. Imagine Davis in his study, maps spread across a table. His generals argue, his government strains under shortages, his people weary of war. He rubs his temples, exhausted, yet unyielding. Like Lincoln, he seldom slept easily. Davis faced the impossible task of leading a nation with fewer resources, less industry, and constant pressure from within. He clashed with generals, struggled with states' rights that weakened central authority, and watched as the Confederacy slowly unraveled beneath him. Beyond presidents, generals bore their own immense burdens. Ulysses Grant endured endless battles of attrition, pressing forward despite staggering losses. Robert E. Lee, revered in the South, led with strategy and resolve. yet carried the knowledge that his army was outnumbered and undersupplied. Imagine Grant sitting quietly outside his tent after battle, a cigar in hand, his uniform stained with dust. His eyes are steady but weary. He knows tomorrow will bring more fighting, more decisions, more lives weighed against strategy. Imagine Lee on a hillside, gazing across fields dotted with campfires. He folds his hands behind his back, his face calm, his thoughts heavy. He knows his men adore him, but also that they suffer, hungry and barefoot. His choices must balance courage with survival. For leaders, the war was not abstract. Every order meant lives lost, families broken, futures reshaped. Letters arrived daily with news of death, defeat, or the endless hunger of troops. Both Lincoln and Davis aged rapidly, their faces marked by sleepless nights and relentless strain. Picture now the two capitals at night. In Washington, Lincoln writes by lamplight, his hand steady but slow, the silence broken only by the scratch of his pen. In Richmond, Davis studies maps, his brow furrowed, his thoughts clouded by the enormity of the struggle. Between them lies a nation divided, armies marching, fields scarred. The burden of leadership is heavy, nearly unbearable. For us today, such responsibility would feel crushing. For them, it was endured in silence, day after day, until war's end. The Civil War was not endless battle. Most soldiers spent their days in waiting, drilling, marching, resting in camps. To endure the monotony, to soften the fear of battle, they turned to music, letters, and the fragile thread of connection to home. Music was everywhere. Soldiers carried fiddles, banjos, around campfires. They sang songs to pass the time, lift spirits, or remind themselves of home. Some songs were playful, filled with humor about hardtack, marching, or generals. Others were solemn, carrying longing for families far away. Imagine a camp at dusk. Fires burn low, men sit on logs and stumps. A fiddle plays softly, voices rise in song. Not loud, not polished, but steady, blending together in the smoky night. The tune is familiar, the words simple, yet they bind the men together. In that moment, the war fades, replaced by music and shared memory. Bands also played in armies. Before battles, drums and bugles signaled commands. Afterward, bands might play hymns or marches, their notes carrying across fields heavy with silence. Letters were lifelines. Soldiers wrote whenever they could, on scraps of paper, with pencils worn short. They described camp life, battles, weather, and above all, their longing for home. Imagine a soldier writing by candlelight. His hands are calloused, his body weary, yet his words are tender. He tells his wife he is safe, though he leaves out his hunger, his sickness, his fear. He asks about the children, the farm, the small rhythms of daily life. His letter is folded carefully, smudged with dirt, carried miles by couriers before reaching home weeks later. For families, receiving a letter was a moment of relief, even if it carried little detail. To hold words written by a loved one was to feel their presence, however briefly. In camp, soldiers created routines that gave comfort. Some whittled wood into small figurines or pipes. Others played cards, told stories, or carved their initials into trees. Religious services were common. Sermons preached under trees or in tents. Hymns sung in unison. Imagine a Sunday morning in camp. Soldiers gather in a clearing, their uniforms rumpled, their faces solemn. A chaplain speaks softly, his words of faith carrying into the air. Men bow their heads, some whisper prayers, others simply listen. For a brief time, the chaos of war is replaced by ritual and stillness. Many carried keepsakes from home, a lock of hair, a photograph, a ribbon. These small tokens were treasured, tucked into breast pockets, held during moments of fear. Imagine a soldier on the eve of battle. He takes out a small photograph of his family, the edges worn from handling. He looks at it quietly, folds it carefully, and places it close to his heart. Around him, others do the same. Each token is a reminder of why they endure, why they march, why they fight. Some songs carried deep longing. Tunes like Home, Sweet Home, or Lorena were sung softly, often bringing tears to weary faces. Music gave voice to feelings that words could not. Picture a quiet evening, the sky turning dark. A single voice begins a song, slow and steady. Others join, their voices weaving together. The song rises, carrying sorrow and comfort at once. For a moment, the camp is united, not in war, but in longing for peace, for home. Picture now a Civil War camp under the stars. Fires glow faintly, letters are written by candlelight, songs drift softly into the night. A harmonica plays, a man hums, another carves a piece of wood. Around them lies war. Yet within this small circle, there is music, memory, and fragile comfort. For soldiers, survival was not only food and shelter, it was these small rituals, songs, letters, tokens, that kept them whole. For us, such fragile comforts might feel too thin to endure. For them, they were everything. Wars are not fought only with armies. They are fought with grain, cloth, iron, and coin. In the Civil War, the economies of both Union and Confederacy strained under the weight of years of conflict. For families and communities, this meant shortages, inflation, and constant worry over how to endure. The Union had factories, railroads, and a larger population. Its economy was stronger, but even so, shortages reached families. As factories turned to producing rifles, uniforms, and cannons, civilian goods became scarcer. Prices rose, wages struggled to keep pace. Imagine a northern marketplace in 1863. Stalls that once overflowed with flour, sugar, and cloth now sit half empty. A woman stands with a small purse in hand, carefully choosing what she can afford. The shopkeeper shakes his head. Prices have risen again, and her coins by less than the week before. She sighs, knowing she must stretch her food for her children. For the Confederacy, the strain was far greater. With fewer factories, blockades cutting off imports, and farmland often destroyed by marching armies, the South faced hunger and collapse. Inflation soared to staggering levels. Confederate money, once trusted, became nearly worthless. Imagine holding a Confederate bill in your hand. It looks like money, with ink and numbers, but in the marketplace it buys almost nothing. A pound of flour, once $1, now costs 100. Families trade goods instead. A chicken for flour, a blanket for shoes. Money no longer holds meaning. Hunger grew so severe that riots broke out. In Richmond and other southern cities, women gathered in crowds, stormed shops, and demanded bread at fair prices. The government tried to calm them, but desperation could not be silenced. Imagine such a scene. Dozens of women, their children hungry, march through the streets. They shout, their voices filled not with anger but with desperation. They enter shops, seizing flour, bread, and meat. Soldiers arrive, but the women stand firm. They have no choice, for their families starve. In rural areas, the strain was constant. Farmers who once grew food for market now saw their crops seized by armies or destroyed by marching troops. Families planted small gardens, foraged for wild greens, or raised chickens to survive. Yet even then, hunger lingered. Imagine a southern farm in 1864. The fields lie fallow, the fences broken. A woman gathers wild berries with her children, placing them carefully in a basket. This will be supper. Small, sweet, but hardly enough. The family eats slowly, stretching what little they have. Clothing, too, grew scarce. Uniforms wore thin, boots fell apart, blankets became precious. Families unraveled old garments to make new ones, patched shoes with scraps of leather, and shared blankets on cold nights. Imagine a child in winter, wrapped in a coat far too large, the fabric worn and patched. His mother tucks it tighter, knowing it is all they have. The wind cuts through, but the coat is survival. For the wealthy, survival was easier. Some had reserves of food, connections to buy scarce goods, or plantations with enslaved labor. But for the poor, North and South alike, the war was constant struggle. Survival meant sacrifice. Fewer meals, smaller portions, worn clothes, endless worry. Picture now a marketplace at dusk in Richmond. The air filled with murmurs. A woman carries a small sack of cornmeal, her face lined with exhaustion. Children tug at her dress, asking for supper. Around her, stalls are nearly empty, shopkeepers tired, prices scrawled higher on small boards. This was war, not in battles, but in hunger and want. For us today, surrounded by abundance, such scarcity would feel unbearable. For them, it was the rhythm of each day, endured with quiet resilience. The Civil War was not only fought in fields and trenches, it was also fought in secrecy, in the passing of notes, the watching of roads, the listening at doors. Both Union and Confederate armies depended on information. Spies, scouts, and informants shaped battles as much as cannons or muskets. Many women became spies, their presence less suspected. They carried messages in hair buns, in baskets of eggs, even sewn into hems of dresses. Some opened their homes to officers, listening carefully, then passing information across lines. Imagine a woman in Richmond, her parlor filled with visiting officers. She pours tea, her manner calm, her eyes attentive. She listens as they speak of troop movements, of shortages, of plans. Later, by candlelight, she writes a small note, her handwriting neat, her heart steady. She folds it, hides it in her bonnet, and prepares to deliver it at dawn. Notable figures included Rose O'Neill Greenhow, a Confederate sympathizer in Washington who passed secrets from Union officials, and Harriet Tubman, who, beyond her Underground Railroad work, guided Union raids and provided intelligence. Enslaved people in the South also acted as informants, slipping through lines to deliver knowledge of Confederate movements, terrain, or supply routes. Their presence often went unnoticed, making them invaluable sources of information. Imagine an enslaved man guiding a Union officer through woods at night. He moves quickly, quietly, his knowledge of the land deep. He whispers warnings of patrols, of rivers ahead, of hidden paths. His risk is immense, but his choice is clear. Each step is a step toward freedom and change. Scouts, often young men, rode through dangerous terrain to gather intelligence. They mapped roads, counted troops, and watched enemy camps. They traveled alone or in small groups, vulnerable to capture at every moment. Imagine riding through a moonlit field, the grass whispering against your boots. In the distance, fires flicker, an enemy camp. You crouch low, watching, counting, memorizing. Then, as dawn breaks, you turn back, racing to deliver news before the enemy can move. Messages were often sent in code. Simple ciphers, invisible ink, and signals with lanterns or flags carried secrets across lines. A single mistake could mean exposure, capture, or execution. Imagine two lanterns hung in a farmhouse window, faint in the night. To most, they are harmless light. To a passing scout, they carry meaning, a warning, a signal, a call to action. Quiet, fragile, yet vital. The risks were immense. Captured spies were rarely spared. They faced imprisonment or execution as traitors. Yet still, many took the risk, knowing their actions could change the course of battles, perhaps even the war itself. Imagine a small jail cell, dimly lit. A captured spy sits quietly, their face calm. They know the cost, yet also the value of what they carried. Their silence now protects others, their choice already made. This was the war beneath the war, a conflict of whispers, maps, and notes passed by hand. It left no great monuments, no famous battlefields. Yet without it, armies would have marched blind, and countless lives might have been lost needlessly. Picture now a quiet farmhouse at night in Virginia. A woman writes by candlelight, her note small and hurried. She folds it, tucks it into a loaf of bread cooling on the hearth. At dawn, a boy carries that bread down a dusty road, his steps steady, his expression calm. To him, it is bread. To the army, it is information. The Civil War was not only rifles and cannons. It was also silence, secrecy, and the courage of those who carried truth in the shadows. The Civil War was a war of movement. Armies rarely stayed still. They marched from battle to battle, from camp to camp, often covering 20 miles or more in a single day. The rhythm was slow, endless, and exhausting. Imagine standing in line at dawn, pack strapped across your shoulders, musket heavy in your hands. The air is cool, the sky grey. The command is given, and the column begins to move. You walk mile after mile, boots striking dirt roads, dust rising with every step. By noon, the sun is high, the air heavy. Sweat soaks your shirt, your mouth is dry. The road stretches ahead endlessly, a line of men disappearing into the horizon. Each step feels heavier than the last, yet still you walk. The weather was relentless. In summer, heat baked the earth, dust filled throats, and men collapsed from sunstroke. In winter, snow and ice cut through thin boots, fires burned low, and frostbite blackened toes. Imagine a soldier in winter marching through snow. His boots are worn, the leather split, his feet numb. His breath forms clouds in the cold air. He pulls his coat tighter, though it is thin, and lowers his head against the wind. The march continues, though his body aches to stop. The terrain was no kinder. Roads turned to mud after rain, swallowing wagons and slowing columns. Forests tangled movements, rivers blocked paths, mountains tested endurance. Soldiers waded through swamps, forded rivers, climbed ridges, always carrying their heavy packs. Imagine a line of soldiers trudging through knee-deep mud. Wagons sink, horses strain, men stumble, pulling one another forward. The rain falls steady, the ground slippery. Progress is slow, measured in feet rather than miles. Exhaustion was constant. Packs weighed 30 to 40 pounds, filled with blankets, cooking pans, and ammunition. Muskets added more weight. After hours of marching, bodies ached, feet blistered, backs bent. Imagine lying on the ground at night after such a march. You spread a blanket on hard earth, too tired to eat, too weary to speak. Around you, others collapse the same way. The stars above are bright, but your eyes close quickly. Sleep comes, not from comfort, but from exhaustion. Not all could endure. Some fell behind, stragglers left to catch up as best they could. Others deserted, slipping into woods at night, unwilling or unable to continue. Imagine a man stepping quietly from the column at dusk, his pack still on his back. He disappears into the trees, his footsteps fading. For him, the march is over. For others, it continues without pause. Picture now an army on the move. The line of men stretches for miles, disappearing into haze. Wagons creak, horses snort, drums beat faintly. The road is dusty, the air heavy, the march endless. Each man walks silently, his thoughts his only companion. This was war as much as battle. The march, the weather, the terrain. For us today, it would feel unbearable. For them, it was the constant rhythm of survival, step after weary step. The Civil War was not contained to distant battlefields. It swept through villages, across farms, into towns and homes. For civilians, there was no front line. The war arrived suddenly, in columns of soldiers, in wagons of supplies, in cannon fire that shook their windows. Imagine a quiet farm in Virginia, its fields green, its barn full of hay. One morning, the sound of drums and boots fills the air. Soldiers march in, their commander demanding food, hay for horses, firewood for camps. The farmer protests softly, but there is no choice. Chickens are taken, cattle driven off, hay piled into wagons. By evening, the farm is empty, the family left with little. The war has passed through, leaving absence behind. This was the reality for countless farmers, both north and south. Armies lived off the land, and civilians bore the cost. In towns like Fredericksburg and Vicksburg, civilians endured sieges, weeks or months of shelling, hunger and fear. Families sheltered in basements, listening to cannon fire above, their homes trembling with each blast. Imagine sitting in a dark cellar, the earth cool, the air damp. Above, cannon fire booms, plaster falls from the ceiling. Children cling to their mother's skirts. She whispers softly, trying to calm them, though her own heart races. Outside, the town is shattered, but inside, silence and fear hold tightly. Many families fled as armies approached. They loaded wagons with what little they could carry, leaving behind homes and farms. Roads filled with refugees, women, children, the elderly, moving slowly, uncertain of where safety could be found. Imagine a dirt road crowded with wagons. A woman walks beside her children, carrying a bundle of clothes. Behind her, smoke rises from her home, now occupied or destroyed. She does not look back. She cannot. Her only thought is to keep moving, one foot in front of the other. In border states like Missouri and Kentucky, towns were divided. Neighbors took opposite sides. Families split. Violence erupted within communities. Guerrilla warfare made life uncertain, as raids struck suddenly, leaving destruction in their wake. Imagine a small town where one house flies the Union flag, another the Confederate. At night, riders sweep in, doors are kicked open, barns set aflame. By morning, the town is quiet again, its trust broken, its people wary of one another. Some towns lived under occupation. Soldiers filled streets, set up headquarters in courthouses, and enforced curfews. Civilians adapted, quietly enduring, avoiding conflict when possible. Life continued, but always under watchful eyes. Imagine walking through your town square, soldiers standing on corners, their rifles in hand. The shops are open but quiet. You buy bread, the price doubled, the baker's face lined with worry. Around you, soldiers' boots echo against cobblestones, a constant reminder of control. Picture now the American countryside in 1864. A farmhouse stands empty, its windows broken, its fields trampled. A town lies half-ruined, its streets silent. its people thin with hunger. Along a road, families walk slowly, carrying what they can, their eyes fixed on the horizon. For civilians, the Civil War was not distant. It was in their homes, their fields, their streets. Survival meant endurance in the face of uncertainty, hunger, and loss. For us, such intrusion would feel unbearable. For them, it was the harsh rhythm of life until war's end. In a time when survival was never assured, faith became a refuge. For soldiers and civilians alike, religion gave structure to uncertainty and comfort in grief. Across North and South, sermons were preached, hymns were sung, and prayers whispered into the silence of night. In camps, chaplains held services beneath trees or in makeshift tents. Soldiers gathered, weary and dirty, their heads bowed. Hymns rose into the air, voices blending softly. Imagine a clearing at dawn. A chaplain stands with a small Bible, his voice calm, carrying over the rustle of leaves. Soldiers sit on logs or the ground, their faces solemn. The words are simple: hope, forgiveness, strength. For a brief time, the war is set aside, replaced by silence and reverence. Many soldiers carried small Bibles or prayer books. At night, by firelight, they read verses, whispering words of comfort. For families left behind, churches became gathering places for support. Women prayed for husbands and sons. Children recited verses for absent fathers. Ministers preached about sacrifice, endurance, and faith in God's plan. Imagine a small wooden church in a rural town. Candles flicker, families fill the pews, their faces weary. The minister speaks of trials, of testing, of perseverance. Outside, the wind rattles the windows, but inside, the hymn begins, voices rising in unison. For a moment, the community is united in hope, African American faith and freedom for enslaved and newly freed people. Faith was a source of strength and a vision of freedom. Spirituals carried messages of hope, of deliverance, of a future beyond bondage. Prayer meetings in cabins or fields gave voice to resilience and longing for liberation. Imagine a group gathered at night in secret. A faint fire glows, voices hum a low song, steady, rhythmic, filled with yearning. The words speak of crossing rivers, of finding freedom, of faith that endures even in chains. The song is both prayer and promise. For families who lost loved ones, faith was often the only explanation. Death was framed as sacrifice, as service to God's will, as part of a larger plan. Sermons offered comfort, that those who died had not done so in vain, that their souls were at peace. Imagine a mother kneeling beside her bed at night. A letter lies folded on the table, news of her son's death. She whispers a prayer, her voice trembling. Tears fall softly, but her words carry steadiness. Gratitude for his life, hope for his peace, strength for her own endurance. Religion also divided. Both Union and Confederacy saw themselves as favored by God. Ministers preached that their side was righteous, that victory was divinely ordained. Yet, within this division, ordinary people simply sought comfort, a reason to endure, a hope for tomorrow. Picture now the American countryside at night during the Civil War. In towns, church bells toll softly. In camps, hymns drift over fires. In cabins, prayers are whispered into the dark. Across North and South, rich and poor, free and enslaved, voices rise in search of meaning, of comfort, of peace. For us, with distance, the prayers feel faint, carried on air, long vanished. For them, in their moment, they were everything. The thread that held them together when the world seemed broken. The Civil War reached into every home, shaping not only adults but children. Their days were altered, their roles expanded, their innocence reshaped by hunger, absence, and loss. When fathers and older brothers marched away, children took on heavy tasks. Boys plowed fields, herded animals, chopped wood. Girls cooked, sewed, carried water, and tended to younger siblings. Imagine a boy of 12 pushing a plow through heavy soil, his hands blistered, his face lined with effort. A mule pulls ahead, slow and stubborn. Sweat runs into his eyes, but he does not stop. At night, he lies down exhausted, his small body carrying the weight of work meant for grown men. Imagine a girl stirring a pot at a hearth, her dress patched, her hands reddened from heat. She hums softly to soothe the baby on her hip, while another sibling tugs at her skirt. Childhood slips away into responsibility. In towns, children saw soldiers march through streets, flags waving, drums beating. At first, they cheered, mimicking parades in play. But as the war dragged on, the novelty faded, replaced by shortages, hunger, and the sight of wounded men returning home. Imagine a child peering out a window at a line of soldiers passing by. His eyes are wide, filled with awe and fear. He asks his mother when his father will return, but she cannot answer. The drums fade, leaving only silence and longing. Many children lost fathers, brothers, or uncles. Orphanages filled. Homes became quiet. Some children carried grief without fully understanding it. Their questions met with silence. Imagine a little girl sitting on a porch, holding a doll sewn from scraps of cloth. She asks when her father will come home. Her mother kneels, takes her hand, and whispers softly. The girl listens, her eyes downcast, not fully understanding, yet sensing the weight of loss. For enslaved children, war brought both hardship and the fragile hope of freedom. They worked in fields, fetched water, or cared for siblings while parents labored. Yet, when Union armies approached, some glimpsed a different future. Imagine a boy watching soldiers in blue march past his cabin. He stands barefoot in the doorway, eyes wide, heart racing. He does not know what freedom will mean, but he feels its possibility in the steady steps of the men before him. Some children lived directly in camps, following fathers or mothers who worked as laundresses, cooks, or seamstresses. They grew up surrounded by soldiers, the sounds of drums and bugles, the sight of uniforms and weapons. Imagine a child playing with wooden sticks, pretending they are muskets. As soldiers drill nearby, his laughter echoes briefly, blending with the steady rhythm of marching feet. For him, war is both terrifying and strangely normal. Children sensed more than adults often realized. They felt the absence of laughter at home, the heaviness of whispered conversations, the worry in their mother's eyes. They might not have understood politics, but they understood loss. Picture now a small farmhouse at dusk. Inside, children gather around a fire, their faces lit by its glow. One reads a letter aloud. Their father's handwriting, shaky but precious. The words are simple. He is alive. He misses them. He prays for peace. The children listen quietly, clutching the paper, their world smaller but bound by hope. For children, the Civil War was not strategy or speeches. It was the absence of fathers, the burden of labor, the confusion of loss, and the faint glimmer of hope for return. For us, such burdens, at such an age, would feel impossible. For them, it became their childhood. By 1865, the Civil War had ground down armies and civilians alike. The Confederacy, battered and exhausted, saw its strength unravel. The Union, though victorious, carried its own scars. Hundreds of thousands dead, countless homes broken, a nation weary of grief. The final campaigns imagine spring in Virginia, 1865. The fields are muddy, the trees bare. Confederate soldiers march barefoot, their uniforms torn, their rations gone. Hunger gnaws constantly. Union forces press forward, their numbers greater, their supplies stronger. The end feels near, yet each day drags on, filled with marching and skirmishing. Appomattox, the war's symbolic end, came at Appomattox Courthouse in April 1865. Robert E. Lee.com, but weary, met Ulysses S. Grant in a small house. The two men spoke quietly, their words respectful. Grant offered generous terms. Confederate soldiers would lay down arms but could return home, free to rebuild. Imagine that quiet room. The table is small, papers spread across it. Lee sits tall, his uniform clean, but his face lined with sorrow. Grant sits across from him, plain in dress, steady in voice. Outside, soldiers wait silently, the weight of years of war pressing upon them. The pens scratch, hands shake, and with signatures, the war ends. Ruin across the South, but for civilians, surrender did not erase suffering. The South lay in ruin. Farms were burned, railroads destroyed, towns reduced to rubble. Food was scarce, money worthless, futures uncertain. Imagine walking through Richmond after its fall. Buildings are blackened, chimneys stand alone, streets are littered with ash. Families wander through ruins, searching for what can be salvaged. Hunger lingers, and yet life must begin again. Freed people for 4 million formerly enslaved people. The war's end brought emancipation. Chains were broken, yet freedom was fragile. Families searched for one another, walking miles to reunite. Churches and schools were built, communities formed, hope stirred. Yet prejudice and violence remained, shadowing new beginnings. Imagine a man standing at dawn, free for the first time in his life. He breathes deeply, the air cool and sharp. Behind him, the fields remain, but before him lies the possibility of choice. Uncertain, fragile, but real. Reconstruction's dawn. The war's end began Reconstruction, a time of rebuilding and redefinition. The Union sought to heal, to mend divisions, to define freedom in practice. But conflict remained, in politics, in communities, in homes. The war was over, but its shadows endured. Lincoln's death, only days after Appomattox, President Lincoln was assassinated. The nation's joy in peace turned quickly to grief. His death cast uncertainty over Reconstruction, removing the man whose steady hand had guided the Union through its darkest years. Imagine the quiet streets of Washington in April 1865. Bells toll. Flags hang at half-staff. Crowds gather in silence. A nation mourns, even as it struggles to imagine the future. A closing image picture now America at dusk in 1865. Smoke still rises faintly from ruined towns. Soldiers return home, some limping, some carrying empty sleeves where arms once were. Families embrace, weep, and count losses. Freed men and women walk roads newly open, searching for family, for land, for beginnings. The war has ended, but its imprint lingers everywhere. Fields are scarred, homes empty, lives altered forever. A new chapter begins. Fragile, uncertain, but carrying the faint rhythm of hope. We have journeyed far through the Civil War's world. We have seen soldiers marching until their feet bled, families stretching meager meals, children shouldering burdens too heavy, and enslaved people searching for freedom in a landscape of danger. For those who lived it, life was constant survival. The simplest things, clean water, warm clothing, enough to eat, were fragile and uncertain. Armies lived in tents filled with smoke and sickness. Families prayed over fields stripped bare. Children worked from dawn until dusk. Freedom came only slowly, painfully, and not for all. For us today, with full cupboards, warm homes, and medicine close at hand, such a world would feel impossible. The weight of hunger, the endless march, the loss that touched every family, these are burdens we would not survive. And yet, when we look gently back, we also see their resilience. Soldiers found comfort in song. Families leaned on faith. Children found play even in hardship. Freed people carried hope forward, shaping a new future in the shadow of war. Their endurance is the quiet thread that carried them through. Now, as this story draws to its close, let the images soften. The crack of muskets fades. The marching columns dissolve into haze. The farms, the towns, the ruined fields grow still. All that remains is silence, heavy, calm, and complete. You are here, not in their world, but in your own, safe, warm, and far from the weight of their struggle. The soothing music that has accompanied us since the beginning still drifts beneath my words, steady and calm, like a lullaby stretched across time. And so, with the Civil War behind us, let yourself release the heaviness of the past. Breathe slowly. Rest gently. Sleep, if you wish, carried not by battle but by peace. The war is over. What remains is quiet. What remains is rest.